opposed 74. The record will be amended accordingly. I call Paul Foster-Bell.
E te mana whakawā tuaroa tēnā koe. E ngā mema o te whareparamata o Aotearoa tēnā koutou katoa. Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise to take a call on the Ombudsman Cost Recovery Amendment Bill in this first reading debate. And I want to begin by firstly congratulating the member for having his bill drawn and actually the constructive and well-reasoned approach that he takes to all measures, but in particular this bill, which I am sure is a very, very well-intentioned piece of legislation. And I think it is important to reflect on the fact that New Zealand is well served by our Ombudsman. It was a very positive innovation when it was brought into place here in 1975, well ahead of many equivalent jurisdictions. We took, I guess, some guidance from our friends in Scandinavia, also countries which are rated very, very highly in terms of good governance and a lack of corruption and transparency of government. I think it was Denmark who first introduced an ombudsman in 1955, so 20 years before New Zealand introduced this. And of other countries with which we might compare ourselves, for instance, Canada, another common law jurisdiction with Her Majesty the Queen as head of state. At the provincial level, they began to introduce ombudsmen or officers equivalent to an ombudsman, such as an inspector general or a public advocate. The term parliamentary commissioner is also used, but reflects a similar functionality. The provinces of Canada introduced ombudsmen throughout the late 60s and early 70s. But we were certainly ahead of our Australian friends who introduced them a year after us in 76, the Austrians in 77, and other countries such as Barbados who waited until 1980. The Belgians didn't introduce an ombudsman until 1997. Gibraltar until 1999, and the EU, which of course purports to be a very well-run and transparent supranational organisation, didn't introduce the function of an ombudsman until 2013. So we were leaders in this, but also the services of the ombudsman and the transparency that they provide, particularly in, as the members referred to, the investigation and follow-up around Official Information Act requests, and particularly those where the person making the request isn't satisfied with some element of the response, is very important, and it's something that we take seriously. So we are committed, Mr Speaker, to the Office of the Ombudsman. But the reason that I won't be supporting the bill in this debate is that we actually have no reason to believe that the Office of the Ombudsman is in any way underfunded. And I think when this bill was introduced, there may have been greater cause to believe that some closer look at the provision of funding for the office was required. But I suspect it has been overtaken by events. And I hope some of the information that I hope to relate in this debate might convince members that that is indeed the case. So we believe that the office isn't underfunded, and actually the imposition of a cost recovery scheme in and of itself would not be without risk, and it may actually undermine some aspects of the complaints process. In fact, we think that there are several other mechanisms by which productivity of the Ombudsman's office has been improved, and I will go into those, Mr Parker. So since this bill was added to the ballot in 2012, the increase in funding for the Office of the Ombudsman has been about 2/3. Its baseline funding back in 2012 was $9 million, and the Ombudsman now receives $15.2 million in the last year's budget. So that is an increase of 2/3. And from the numbers that we've had a look at, the productivity rate of the office has similarly increased. So we've seen a fall in the number of complaints on hand, which is now down to 1,339. And the figures that we have been provided suggest that the backlog that the office are working through should be halved by June of this year, so we're talking next month, and completely cleared by the end of June 2018, which is a year earlier than had been initially planned by the office. The figures to hand show that more than 70% of the complaints received since the 1st of July 2016 have been resolved within 3 months of receipt, and this rate is currently heading towards 90%. And it is the view of the Office of the Ombudsman that by the year 2020, no complaint will take more than 12 months to resolve. And we have to bear in mind that we are dealing in some cases with complex complaints that may be run to many, many pages that are absolutely peppered with detail. And as the member said, some official information that is released contains multiple redactions, and there may be multiple causes for complaint within any one release. And I would want to point out to the House that the redactions that are made in information released from government departments are often made for incredibly good reasons and for important reasons. And as a former official, during my 10 years with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I had no responsibility, I should comment, on redacting any of the live sheep export information that pertains to the gentleman was actually Sheikh Hamoud Al-Khalaf, not Mr. Ali Al-Hamoud, as the member says. But I didn't deal with that particular case in terms of redactions, Mr. Speaker. But in redacting information, most of the officials that I've seen in practice take their job very, very seriously. And under Section 6 of the Official Information Act, redactions are made for important reasons. So 6A, for instance, removes information that prejudices our security, the national security of New Zealand and the defence of the realm. This is a very important point. This is the first responsibility of any government to ensure that information being released won't prejudice the security of our country. 6B includes information which is entrusted to us from other countries, which we have accepted on the promise that we will not release it. The maintenance of laws, Section 6C, and we go on. The safety of people, so information pertaining, for instance, to the operations of New Zealand personnel abroad would often be covered under Section D. Or the economy of New Zealand, information which may be damaging or injurious during trade negotiations. There are some very good reasons why that information isn't released publicly at the time, and it may be 20 or 30 years down the track. And I would note many departments are now taking a proactive approach to going through information that can be released publicly even before any period of time has expired that it might otherwise be looked at. They're proactively working through their archives. But my point, Mr. Speaker, is that there are often good reasons why information should be withheld. And the information that we've seen, including comments from the Office of the Ombudsman, is that the processes that they have are working well. So some of the changes in their practices which have improved the performance of the Office and are delivering much better results are changing the focus on an early resolution and adopting more flexible practices in their office. This includes, for instance, transitioning to working almost entirely electronically and undertaking much more of their interaction with government departments by phone calls rather than telephone interviews, which can be documented and duly recorded, minuted and form a proper record. But of course are much quicker and easier, not to mention cheaper in terms of travel than necessarily going to the offices of the government departments and agencies in question. They've also employed some specialised staff who have a degree of expertise in the area that they are working on. This is not merely a legal and administrative role. Sometimes specific subject matter knowledge is advantageous in terms of resolving the complaint or the query in a more timely but also hopefully a more accurate fashion. They work very closely now with the State Services Commission and have been proactively improving the general understanding of how the Official Information Act works throughout the public sector. The member mentioned journalists, the media who often rely on the OAA as a means to and quite rightly, to hold the government to account, but also to gather information that might be the source for newsworthy publication, or it might in fact corroborate other people that they've interviewed in their processes. And I think the general understanding of how the OAA works is good among government departments, and there may be even further gains that can be had by ensuring that others also understand how it should work, and they've produced guides and moved material to their website.
Order. The member's time has expired. I call Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.